When will France finally accept the truth? The era of its dominance in the Sahel is over, yet Paris can't seem to let go. After being kicked out of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, France is still trying, still plotting, desperate to claw back the power it once had. But this time, they didn't come with soldiers. They came with something far more dangerous: spies. And one of those spies has just been caught. This isn't a rumor. It's not some conspiracy theory. The story was first exposed by the French media giant Le Monde. So if you think this is just talk, think again. But here's what everyone wants to know. Who was this spy? How did Burkina Faso catch him? And what exactly was he doing on Burkinabè soil? Stay with me, because the answers will shock you. Last month, President Ibrahim Traoré stood before his nation and delivered one of his most explosive speeches yet. With unwavering confidence, he accused the so-called imperialists, France, of a sinister agenda, plundering resources and destabilizing not just Burkina Faso, but the entire West African region. Traoré didn't hold back. He said France had failed in its so-called anti-terrorism mission, and instead of leaving honorably, Paris had shifted to covert operations, trying to break Burkina Faso from within. At the time, some doubted him, some called it rhetoric, but now the truth has surfaced, and it is more shocking than anyone expected. According to French media itself, a French army corporal, someone who had been operating in Burkina Faso under the radar, has been exposed. This man, Damien L., wasn't just any foreigner. He had been living and working in Burkina since 2020, posing as a private security consultant for the mining sector. On paper, he was protecting assets. In reality, he was suspected of something far darker: spying for French intelligence. For almost 2 weeks, Damien L. has been held incommunicado in Ouagadougou. His cover? A security officer for an Australian mining company. His mission? That's what investigators are now racing to uncover. And this raises the question: was Traoré right all along? Is France running a shadow war in West Africa? Stay with us, because what we're about to reveal might change everything you thought you knew about this struggle for control. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. Damien L. wasn't arrested on some battlefield. He was quietly taken into custody by police in the capital, Ouagadougou. The official reason? A visa issue. Apparently, he had just returned to Burkina Faso for another 1-month rotation, something he'd been doing routinely for 4 years. It all looked normal, until it didn't. After his arrest, authorities searched his hotel room. They seized his phones, his personal computer. What they found inside those devices was enough to raise every alarm in the building. An immediate investigation was launched, and what Burkinabè intelligence uncovered was nothing short of explosive. Damien wasn't just a harmless security consultant. He was a former French soldier, and more importantly, he had been exchanging sensitive information about Burkina Faso's internal security situation. Let that sink in. A former French military officer embedded inside Burkina Faso's mining sector, secretly transmitting updates on the country's security climate. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself, who else would he be sending that information to, if not to France? It's not just suspicion anymore. It's a pattern, a blueprint. France, it seems, is still watching, still listening, still trying to find a way back in. And here's the most chilling part. Damien L. may not be alone. There could be dozens, if not hundreds, just like him. High-level operatives, quiet observers, embedded in the very countries that kicked France out. They're gathering intelligence, monitoring local developments, and feeding it all back to Paris, one email, one encrypted message at a time. And the question that now hangs over the entire Sahel is, what is France planning next? And here's the twist. This isn't the first time France has been caught red-handed in Burkina Faso, not even close. In April of last year, the Burkinabè government made a stunning move. They expelled 3 French diplomats from the country, accusing them of engaging in subversive activities. The order came directly from the Burkinabè Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The message to the French embassy was clear. These individuals were now persona non grata. They had 48 hours to pack their bags and leave. Their names: Gwenaël Habouzi, Hervé Fournier, Guillaume Ressacher. Now, let's take a moment to unpack that word, subversive. The dictionary defines it as an attempt to undermine the power and authority of an established system. In simple terms, these diplomats weren't just sitting behind desks sipping coffee. They were accused of actively working to weaken and destabilize Burkina Faso's military government. The authorities never revealed the exact details of their activities. But think about it. What could be so serious, so dangerous, that a government would kick out 3 foreign diplomats in one swoop? Here's what history tells us. France has used this tactic before, spreading disinformation, planting narratives, turning public opinion against leaders who refuse to bow down to Paris. So, ask yourself, were these diplomats just innocent envoys, or were they high-profile operatives sent to do what France has done in Africa for decades: undermine, divide, and destabilize? We may never know the full extent of their actions, but one thing is certain. Their expulsion sent a loud, clear message. Burkina Faso will not tolerate sabotage, no matter who it comes from. Or maybe, just maybe, the plan was even bigger. What if those French diplomats weren't just spreading propaganda? What if they were trying to infiltrate Burkina Faso's military, planting seeds of dissent that could spark a coup and overthrow Ibrahim Traore? Sounds extreme? Think again. History shows us France has done this before. The possibilities of what these operatives were plotting are endless. But fortunately, this time they were caught and they were sent packing. Still, the desperation behind France's actions reminds us of an even bigger scandal that rocked Burkina Faso not so long ago. December 1st, 2023. The Burkinabè military government makes a stunning announcement. 4 French officials arrested, charged, and imprisoned in Ouagadougou. Who were they? According to the authorities, these weren't ordinary foreigners. They were French secret intelligence agents operating inside the country. And what did Paris say? Oh, they're just IT support staff. Seriously? IT support? This is the same playbook we've seen for decades. When these Western agents are caught red-handed, the excuses come rolling in. They deny, they deflect, they claim innocence. But the Burkinabè authorities weren't buying it, not this time. For more than 2 years, these men were kept under house arrest while investigators dug deep into their activities. What were they doing? What was their mission? We may never know all the details, but the fact that they were detained for that long tells you everything you need to know. And here's the final twist. Just a few months ago, in early 2025, these operatives were finally released. Why? Because of pressure from Morocco. That's right, the Moroccan government stepped in to negotiate their freedom. So now the question isn't whether France is trying to destabilize Burkina Faso. The real question is, how far are they willing to go to regain control of the Sahel? And how many more of their agents are still hiding in plain sight? When the arrest became public, it sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles, and it put France in an incredibly awkward position. Almost immediately, Paris went into damage control mode. Behind the scenes, France scrambled to contain the story. Reports suggest they even reached out to the French media outlet that first broke the news, trying desperately to kill the story before it spread any further. The French Foreign Ministry too jumped in, downplaying the incident, spinning the narrative, hoping the world would look the other way. But no matter how hard they tried, the truth couldn't be buried. 4 French operatives had been caught, and Burkina Faso wasn't backing down. France demanded the immediate repatriation of its citizens, but the Burkinabè authorities refused. Instead, they held their ground and launched a full-scale investigation into what these men were really doing inside the country. And here's where it gets even more telling. If these men were just IT technicians, as Paris claimed, why did France go to such extreme lengths to silence the story? Why try to shut down the media? Why push so hard for their release? The answer seems obvious. Burkina Faso was right. These weren't harmless workers, they were spies. And yet, after 2 years of house arrest and intense negotiations, it took the influence of Morocco to finally secure their release in early 2025. But by then, the message was clear. Burkina Faso is no longer a playground for foreign powers, not for France, not for anyone. Now comes the million-dollar question. What exactly were these spies doing in Burkina Faso? What did investigators uncover during those 2 long years of interrogation? Brace yourself, because what they revealed is nothing short of explosive. According to the confessions, there exists an extensive network of French agents operating across Africa. Their mission? To funnel support, financial, logistical, and tactical, to rebel groups engaged in conflicts across the Sahel. Yes, you heard that right. These so-called operatives weren't just observing. They were actively aiding the very forces that have torn this region apart. Rebel groups, jihadist factions, the same organizations blamed for the endless cycle of terror that has bled Africa for years. Why would France do this? The motive is chillingly clear. By fueling chaos, Paris creates the perfect excuse to maintain a military presence under the noble banner of fighting terrorism. But in reality, it's the oldest trick in the colonial playbook. Create the fire, then sell yourself as the firefighter. And while they're fighting terror, they're also securing something else: unrestricted access to Africa's critical minerals. Gold, uranium, lithium, the lifeblood of modern technology, the resources that power the global economy. Think about how twisted this is. A foreign power manipulating an entire security landscape, sacrificing innocent lives, just to serve its own geopolitical interests. No wonder the terror never stopped. Despite years of French troops in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, the violence persisted. In fact, reports suggest it got worse after foreign forces arrived. Coincidence? Or part of the plan? And here's the real bombshell. If these allegations are true, then the so-called war on terror waged by Western forces in Africa isn't just failing. It might be a carefully orchestrated scam. Which begs the ultimate question: if those sent to fight terrorism are the very ones fueling it, what hope do African nations have? The answer is clear. Africa's leaders must act, and act now. They must scrutinize every foreign troop presence on their soil. They must investigate these so-called counter-terrorism missions, because if they don't, the cycle of chaos will never end. If you think this is all speculation, think again. The recent events in Mali are a chilling example of just how far foreign powers are willing to go. Mali, like much of the Sahel, has been fighting for its survival, facing relentless attacks from Islamic jihadists and, in its case, Tuareg armed rebels. But a few months ago, something shocking happened. The Tuareg rebels launched one of their deadliest assaults yet. Over 3 days of brutal fighting, at least 84 Russian mercenaries and 47 Malian soldiers were killed. It was a devastating blow, one that shook the country to its core. But then came the twist. While Mali was still mourning its losses, a revelation surfaced that changed everything. Ukraine's military intelligence spokesperson, Andriy Yusov, went on public television and made a startling admission. He said the Malian rebels had received all the information they needed to carry out that attack. He didn't just hint at it, he said it openly. Ukraine provided the intelligence. Why? Because their target wasn't Mali. It wasn't the Tuareg rebels. It was the Wagner Group, the Russian mercenaries fighting alongside Malian forces. For Ukraine, this was about humiliation. They wanted to strike at Russia, send a message. But here's the part that should make every African leader pause. In the process, 47 Malian soldiers lost their lives. Did Ukraine care? Not in the slightest. They were willing to sacrifice African lives just to make a political point. Now think about that. If Ukraine can do this openly and even brag about it, what do you think France and the United States are doing behind the scenes? Because here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. Africa has become a chessboard, and its people just pawns in a geopolitical game they never asked to play. In Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traoré has been fighting a war on 2 fronts, the war against terrorism and the war against a narrative built to destroy him. Western media loves to tell a single story, that insecurity has skyrocketed since French troops left, that Burkina Faso is now on the brink. But here's what they don't tell you. On the ground, the Burkinabè military has been making real gains. Towns once swallowed by terrorist groups are being taken back. Communities that lived in fear are returning home. Yet, none of this makes the headlines. Why? Because acknowledging Traoré's success would shatter the myth that France was the region's savior. Instead, the media spins a different tale, painting Traoré as reckless, his army as weak, and French forces as the only thing standing between order and chaos. But that's a lie. The truth? The Burkinabè military has done more in 1 year, without France, than it did in the entire decade under foreign protection. And Traoré knows why the old system failed. In an interview, he laid it out plainly. The military was never given the tools to win. No proper weapons, no serious training. Even the basics like food and living conditions were neglected. Think about that. Hungry soldiers with outdated rifles expected to fight terrorists armed to the teeth. It was a recipe for failure, and maybe that was the point all along. But Traoré is rewriting the script. He's forging new alliances with Russia, Rwanda, Mali, and Niger. He's modernizing the army, boosting morale, and giving his soldiers what they need to win. Because for the first time in decades, Burkina Faso is fighting this battle on its own terms, not Paris's. This is why Traoré made it his mission to rebuild the Burkinabè army from the ground up, not just with weapons, but with pride. One of his first moves was bold and deeply symbolic, improving the lives of his soldiers, better food, better housing, better conditions for the men risking everything to defend their nation. And Traoré didn't just talk about morale, he lived it. Reports say the young captain personally joined soldiers on dangerous missions, standing shoulder to shoulder with them on the front lines. But Traoré knew morale alone wouldn't win this war. He needed firepower, and a lot of it. For years, France controlled what Burkina Faso could buy and from whom. That control is gone. And now, Traoré is striking deals on his own terms, with nations willing to respect his sovereignty: Russia, China, even North Korea. Just recently, Burkina Faso unveiled a game-changing arsenal. At a handover ceremony led by Traoré himself, the defense minister, Brigadier General Kassoum Coulibaly, announced the arrival of advanced military hardware from China: armored vehicles, self-propelled mortars, heavy weapons, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. And here's the kicker. This was only the first of 5 consignments. More is coming. A full-scale strategic rearmament plan is now in motion. But perhaps the most remarkable part? Burkina Faso did this without a cent of foreign aid. No IMF loans, no Western support, no strings attached. For the first time in decades, a West African nation is arming itself on its own terms. What Traoré is building isn't just an army, it's a symbol, a statement that Burkina Faso is done being a client state. And if this trend spreads across the Sahel, France and the West could lose their grip on the entire region. Captain Traoré made it clear, this rearmament isn't luck, it's strategy. Every armored vehicle, every mortar, every drone is the result of strict resource management, and it sends a clear message to the world. Burkina Faso is capable of waging war and winning it. But here's the thing, this isn't Traoré's first bold move. Back in March 2023, he quietly executed one of the largest military upgrades in the country's history. Reports revealed a $415 million acquisition of advanced equipment: drones, fighter jets, troop carriers, combat vehicles, and heavy artillery. The source of the weapons? Still a mystery. But insiders confirmed the arsenal was deployed almost immediately, and the results speak for themselves. Because today, 70% of Burkinabè territory, once under the grip of terror, has been taken back. 70%. That's progress France could never deliver in over a decade of military presence. So no matter what Paris plots behind the scenes, one truth is clear. With Captain Ibrahim Traoré at the helm, Burkina Faso is rewriting its story, from a pawn in foreign games to a nation standing on its own 2 feet. Now the question is, will the rest of Africa follow?